So the topic for today is understanding our guts. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Okay. What we eat, what we eat shapes our guts, and how our guts influences our health. And the gut is very hidden in there, and we don't really know so much about it, and we probably don't think so much about it until we have a stomachache. And then we're like, what's wrong? What did I eat that wasn't good for me? But the gut is actually very, very complex and has a lot of different parts and influences our health and the entire body in ways that we can't even begin to imagine, and in many ways that we still don't understand. Really, the research about our gut and the ecosystem that's going on in there didn't really begin to get studied until maybe the 70s. So it's something relatively new that we're still trying to understand, that we're discovering a lot of things. But there is a lot of really interesting research that can help us understand how to take care of our guts and how our gut takes care of our health. So, the first thing to understand is that we, I, you, each one of us as individuals, we're not just one person. We're not one body and that's it. We are an ecosystem. It's like we're carrying around an entire city within this, what we call body. And so there's microorganisms, bacteria and protozoa and lots of other things that live with us constantly inside and outside of our body. And all of these bacteria and protozoa and other organisms have functions within our body. To us, they're transparent because we can't see them with the naked eye. They're really, really small, but they're constantly doing things for us. And most of this organism that lives with us is actually inside of our gut. And that's why it's important to talk about these microorganisms when we discuss the gut, because the gut is full, jam-packed full of bacteria that are either helping us or working against us. So there's good organisms that live with us and there's bad organisms. So let me begin by telling you the story of one of these microorganisms. And it's called Toxoplasma gondii. And so this is just one of trillions of microorganisms that exist and that live within our bodies. But maybe understanding this one little example can help us understand how these other ones affect us. So this Toxoplasma gondii is an interesting microorganism, and it likes to live in the gut of a cat. It can live in other guts. It can live in our gut, and it can live in the gut of a sheep or a goat or a dog, but it actually prefers most to live in the gut of a cat. So over years and years and years, it's kind of developed this good relationship with the cat's gut, and so they coexist well. Actually, once this Toxoplasma gondii is fully developed, it can only really live in the cat's gut. So otherwise, it doesn't really fully develop. It kind of stagnates in its growth. So if I have a Toxoplasma gondii in my gut, then it's never really going to fully develop. It's just going to live in my guts, and it's going to kind of be paralyzed in its development. It will only complete its development if it gets inside of the gut of a cat. And for that to happen, a cat would have to eat me and eat my gut, and then the Toxoplasma gondii would end up in the gut of the cat. So it's kind of a complicated existence, because when this Toxoplasma gondii wants to have children, it has to send its children away so that they can live in the gut of some other being and then hopefully eventually get back to the gut of a cat in its adult life. So it's very, very complex. So what does this Toxoplasma gondii do? Well, it knows, or it doesn't know, but probably by trial and error, it's figured out that the biggest chance for it to end up in the gut of a cat is if it at first ends up in the gut of a mouse, because cats eat mice. And so how does it get into the gut of a mouse? And once it gets into the gut of the mouse, what can it do to get eaten by a cat? So it has learned that once it gets inside of the gut of a mouse, it needs to go to the brain of the mouse and create the cyst, which is just this secretion of liquid, which affects the brain of the mouse, and it makes it not afraid of the smell of cat urine. Because a mouse, just by nature, if it smells cat urine, it gets very scared and runs away. That is the natural reaction of a mouse when it smells cat urine. But this Toxoplasma gondii, this microorganism, goes to the brain of the mouse and it creates a cyst which affects the mouse's brain so that it's not afraid of cat urine. Is that not incredible?
Wow.
So if you have two mice in different cages, and one has this microorganism in its gut, and the other one doesn't, and you spray cat urine, one of them is going to get very, very, very scared, and the other one is going to be perfectly happy. And how this works is then the mice are not, if they have this microorganism in their gut, they're not afraid of cat urine, which makes the probability of them getting eaten by a cat much larger, which is exactly what this microorganism Toxoplasma gondii wants. So it is actually controlling a whole mouse, this tiny, tiny microorganism that we cannot see is controlling a mouse, forcing it to endanger its existence so that it can end up in the gut of a cat. Is that not amazing?
Wow.
Yes.
How does it get from the cat to the mouse then?
Well, it has to poop out of the cat when it's a little baby. And then that poop needs to be somehow eaten by the mouse. So maybe it ends up as fertilizer in some plant, and then the mouse eats the plant, or there's lots of ways. So it ends up in humans because we have cats in our homes. And so if you're taking care of your cat litter box and you're not careful, and there's Toxoplasma gondii in the poop of the cat, and then that can get inside of you. They actually say that probably about 1/3 of the human population in the world has Toxoplasma gondii inside of us. And it doesn't affect us because we don't get eaten by cats. So it's not a big issue. And it doesn't really make us feel sick or anything. It's just one of the trillions of bacteria that lives inside of us. If we were a mouse, it would be an issue. But since we're not a mouse, then it's not such a big issue. So I wanted to introduce to you this Toxoplasma gondii, just so you understand how these microorganisms, even though they're tiny, 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 can have huge influences over cats, and we'll find out over humans as well. So, the story I was telling, rats are naturally afraid of the smell of cat urine. Toxoplasma gondii changes that. So there is a theory that Toxoplasma gondii, which is in our guts as well, some of us, influences a person's interest in cats. So it's a study that's still not fully developed, but they have done studies where they test to see if the person has Toxoplasma gondii, and then they ask them questions like, do you have a cat? Do you like cats? You know, when you see a cat, do you pet the cat? And the people who do have Toxoplasma gondii inside of their gut are usually more favorable towards cats. They own cats, or they like cats, or they wish they had a cat. Whereas people who don't, it's not that they're against cats, or they just usually are more indifferent. So it's not 100% proven, but that is one of the theories. So that little tiny bacteria or microorganism apparently does affect us humans in our interest towards cats. So it's also suspected that Toxoplasma gondii can have a role in a person having schizophrenia. So, and I'm not saying that all cat owners are schizophrenics. But there is also a study going on where people who have developed schizophrenia apparently have to have this microorganism in them as one of the components to developing schizophrenia. So that's interesting because possibly the cure, or one of the cures for, or preventive measures for not getting schizophrenia could be medicine that gets rid of or kills this Toxoplasma gondii. So it's not fully known yet, but they're studying it. But it's interesting. A tiny little microorganism can have such an influence over us. It can make us like or not like cats, possibly. It can make us have the chance of developing schizophrenia or not. We don't know for sure, but what's important is to understand that these microorganisms have tremendous influence over us. And we're going to see more examples, not just this with the Toxoplasma gondii. So now let's shift sides. Now that we've looked at bacteria and microorganisms, let's look at the digestive tract, which is what we're here to talk about really. And I've divided it into 5 sections which are quite different and have a different role in our digestive system. And so first we have the mouth. And all of these, it's interesting to note that all of these sections have a valve before it, and then an opening or an area where something takes place. So what's the valve before the mouth? The lips. You know, I can close my lips when somebody's trying to shove a carrot in it, and I'm going to keep them from feeding me the carrot if I don't want the carrot. So that's the valve. I have control over what comes into the mouth. So what's the role of the mouth? Well, there's 3 main components. There's saliva, there's bacteria, and then there's the teeth. The saliva is a type of liquid which has a lot of different chemicals which help break down food, is one of the things that saliva does. It also just hydrates the mouth, for example, also makes the passage of food easier because there is a little bit of mucus in saliva, and so for it going down the throat, it makes it easier. There's a lot of different things, but mostly it helps begin the process of breaking down the food. Bacteria also is involved in the process of breaking down the food, and the teeth are also involved in this process of breaking down the food. We're just chewing on the food, we're breaking it down into smaller pieces. So that is the main function of the mouth. Basically to take this bite that you took from an apple and begin to break it down into smaller pieces. In order for our body to use it, it needs to be in tiny, 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 tiny little pieces for it to be able to enter our bloodstream. And so the mouth begins that process of just physically breaking it down into much smaller pieces. Then we have the esophagus, which is basically just a muscle. So it's a tube that on the outside has this muscle that all it does is just squeeze and release. And so if I eat a big piece of cake, then it's going to squeeze it and then squeeze it and then squeeze it until the cake goes from my mouth down to my stomach. And there too, there is a valve, and that is this swallowing function. So there's what is it you clip out if you're sick? The tonsils. So in the tonsil area, there is a mechanism which can keep something from going down into the esophagus. And so there is a valve that can protect from things going down into the esophagus. And then further in the esophagus, there's a valve that keeps it from going into the lungs, because it's the same passageway that air goes into our lungs as food goes into our stomach. And so there's a second valve which just controls. And we've all experienced that going wrong, and we get a little piece of cake in our lungs, and then we're coughing, and it feels really uncomfortable. So those valves are very important. But the esophagus is basically just a muscle to transport the food. There's very, very little of the digestive process going there. It's possible that the muscle in squeezing is possibly breaking it down just a little bit more as well. But its main role is just transportation. Then we get into the stomach, and the stomach basically has two things. So the stomach is just this bag surrounded by muscle. And the stomach, in size, is about 1 liter. So if you took a 1 liter bottle and you poured it in the stomach, then it would be completely full. That's about the size of an adult's stomach. But the incredible thing about the stomach is that it can relax, the muscle around it can relax, and it can allow this bag to expand. And it can actually expand to 4 times its size. So if you wanted to drink 4 big 1 liter bottles, the stomach can take that. It can just relax and expand and expand and expand to 4 times its size. So you could technically drink 4 liters of water and have it just be in the stomach, and then the stomach is full. So it's pretty amazing that the stomach is malleable in that way. And so that's why, we can eat and eat and eat and we start feeling a little bit full, but we can just continue eating because the stomach can really take a lot of food, 4 times its size. So once the food is in the stomach, then there's 2 things that are really going on. The stomach has released a lot of acid into the stomach, which breaks down food. So I don't know if you've ever seen the experiment of somebody takes a glass of Coca-Cola, and they put a tooth in it. And then after 24 hours, the tooth is gone. And it's the acid in the Coca-Cola which is just breaking down the calcium in the tooth and, just disintegrating it. So that's exactly what the stomach is doing. It's taking the food that's in there, and it's just pouring acid all over it, and that just breaks it down, breaks it down, breaks it down. The second thing it's doing is the stomach is a muscle. So once the food is in there and it feels like, okay, the person is finished eating, I'm going to start working. Basically what it does is it squeezes one side, which tosses the food to the other side. And then it squeezes this side and it tosses the food back to this side, just back and forth. And so it's just like this tossing of the food, which also help mix up the acids and physically also just break it down more and more and more. And so eventually the stomach feels like, okay, I've done my job of broken it down as much as I can. Again, there is a valve exiting the stomach, which opens up and lets the food that's now quasi-digested, broken down, into the small intestine. So here we have the small intestine, and the stomach goes from about the nipple down to next to the belly button. So, it's not a circular, it's kind of this angled, it's like a half moon. And so then at the end of the stomach is this valve, and then it goes into the small intestine. And the small intestine just goes around and around and around and around in this midsection. The small intestine is about 8 yards long. So it's a really, really long tube, really, that just winds around and around, and the food just goes in and it just goes through it, in and out, It's a very, very big surface area. And the main role of the small intestine is to absorb nutrients. So as it goes through this long, long tube, this long, long tube is just a surface area that the body uses to absorb nutrients. So there's blood vessels connected to the small intestine all throughout its tract. And what it's doing is it's sucking up carbohydrates, proteins, minerals, vitamins, all the things that we need as it's going through. So our small intestine is actually a sensory organ. Like we think of our eyes, our ears, our skin is a sensory organ. The small intestine is the largest sensory organ in the body. Just like our eyes, it has nerves that detect light, sends that information to our brain, the brain makes an image. And so I know that there is this thing in front of me and I shouldn't walk forward because I'll run into it. Just like my eye is full of these nerves that are taking in information and processing it in the brain and creating an image, so too the small intestine is full of nerves that are taking up information. And we don't really understand what all of this information that it's taking up is. But part of it, for sure, is, okay, we've got a lot of carbohydrates. So we no longer have to worry about energy for the next 6 hours. We're good. We sense that there's a lot of carbohydrates coming through. It's great. There's a lot of water. And I noticed that the mouth was a little bit dry and you're sweating a lot, so we need a lot of water. Good news, there's a lot of water coming in, and so the body feels like, okay, great, the water issue has been taken care of. So there's all of these nerves that are just taking information and informing the brain, but also the rest of the body, what's going on. So it's interesting, the small intestine has such a large surface area that if we laid it out flat, it would be about the size of a tennis court.
It's so gross.
It's incredible that there's that much surface area. And why? Because the body needs to maximize taking in nutrients. As it's going through the small intestine is just sucking up all the nutrients it can as fast as it can. And it's really amazing. It's the interesting thing about the intestine being a sensory organ is that all of the other senses are making us aware of what's going on outside. If I hear a loud bang, then my ears hears it. It tells my brain that there was a loud bang. I turn around immediately to see what's going on. Same thing with my skin. I'm feeling what's on the outside. My eyes, my senses smell. But our intestine is really focused on what's going on inside. And there's a lot of language that points to that. People will say, so what's your gut feeling? And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about that sensory organ that is focused on the inside. How does it feel about this situation? And, to us it's a little bit magical maybe, or confusing. We don't really understand, like, when I meet somebody and I get a gut feeling that I either like this person or I'm scared of this person, what exactly is it that's going on? But part of it is our intestine and the sensory organ that is connected to memory and realizes that when I saw this person, it probably reminded me of somebody else, and it released a bunch of hormones that my gut recognized as fearful. And so I get this gut feeling of fear. And so the gut is a really important organ that keeps us in tune with what's going on inside. What are the hormones that my body is releasing? What are the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that I'm lacking or not lacking or have too much of? So this is really interesting, and obviously this is a science that has just begun to be discovered and understood. But I'm sure that there's a lot more really, really important information for us to learn about our bodies and how they work. And so the gut is not just a digestive tract, it's the sensory organ that is very aware of what is going on inside of us. So after the small intestine, which whines and whines and whines, and what it's doing is sucking up all the nutrients it can, again there is a valve at the end of the small intestine, and it eventually opens up and says, okay, all of you stuff, now you can go on into the large intestine. And what is left when it moves on to the large intestine? Well, hopefully not a lot of nutrients. Hopefully all of the carbohydrates and all of the protein and all of the vitamins and minerals and fats have all been sucked into the body to use for what it needs. But not always. Sometimes some of that nutrition just gets through the small intestine and didn't get sucked up, and so now it moves on to the large intestine. But the bulk of what ends up in the large intestine is insoluble fiber. And I've talked about this fiber a lot before. So what is fiber? Fiber is basically part of vegetables and fruits that create structure that the body cannot break down. And so you think, well, if my body can't break down the fiber and it doesn't really use it, maybe it's not really good for me or important. Maybe I should. So the question is, should I eat an apple or should I juice it, get rid of all the fiber, and just take up all of that compact nutrition? Which is healthier for me? The glass of virgin pressed apple juice or eating the apple? That's the important question. So what role does fiber play in our digestive system, in our need for nutrition, and our health? Well, actually, a very, very big role. The answer is eat the apple. Every time, eat the apple. There is an exception, and that is if you're tremendously nutrition deficient and you just need, like if you're a starving child in Africa, and that child has very, very little nutrition, you would want them to consume as many glasses of straight concentrated nutritional juices as possible just to get their body to react, and then eventually start feeding them fiber again. But for most human beings, in most normal cases, we want to eat fiber. It's really, really important. There's no substitute for the real thing. Fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and grains should all be eaten in their natural form, including the fiber. So now we have a bunch of fiber ending up in the large intestine, along with maybe some of the nutrition that didn't get sucked up, along with maybe some water and other things. And so what is the role of the large intestine? Well, the large intestine is where most of this bacteria resides in our gut. So there's bacteria in the whole process. There's bacteria in my mouth, there's bacteria in the esophagus, there's bacteria in the stomach, there's bacteria in the small intestine, but the majority of the bacteria is in the large intestine. And bacteria love fiber. And so when this fiber that the rest of the digestive tract has not been able to deal with, when it gets to the large intestine, the bacteria are super, super happy. It's party time. Because even though the body can't use the fiber, the bacteria feeds on this insoluble fiber. So the bacteria need fiber in order to thrive, and they will digest part of this fiber, and they will use it to produce other things that are very beneficial to us. So some bacteria will eat fiber that is otherwise useless to us, and in eating that fiber, it produces vitamins that we otherwise wouldn't have gotten from this food. Or it will eat this fiber and it'll produce carbohydrates, extra energy source that we couldn't have gotten from this food had we just eaten it. So the bacteria is actually processing the food even further and producing beneficial side effects for our body from this material that we otherwise couldn't have used. And so bacteria need fiber in order to thrive. So the job of the large intestine is basically to take this stuff that was useless before and again consume it as much as we can to get as much nutrition out of it. The large intestine is also has a big step in sucking out the last of the water from this mass, and so that's why when we poop, it should be solid. The body has taken out as much water as it can, and then it sends it on its way. The large intestine is actually quite short, And it basically just wraps around all of the other organs of the digestive tract, except the esophagus and the mouth, but the stomach, the small intestine that wraps around, and then the liver and all of the other components. The large intestine just basically wraps around that and then goes out the backside. And it's a 3-day process. So first all of this roughage comes in, all of the fiber, and the bacteria eat it and eat it and eat it and eat it and eat it. And then it goes into the second section of the large intestine, and we suck up more water and more nutrients, and the bacteria keep eating it. And then the last part, it's basically just getting compacted together to send out. And then again, after the large intestine, there is a valve, and there's actually 2 valves. So the first valve just recognizes what's coming. And so, for example, if you need to fart, this first valve will let a tiny little bit through, and then there's sensory organs in the middle that will tell you, oh, okay, this is just air that's coming out. And so then both valves will open up, and then you fart. But if it opens up and a little bit of liquid comes in, then this little middle part says to the brain, diarrhea. I need to find a bathroom pronto. And so both valves will stay closed as you run to the bathroom, and then once you're in a safe place, they both open up and you go to the bathroom. So there's actually 2 valves at the end of the large intestine. So this is the process of digestion. We've gone through the 5 parts: the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and then the poop comes out. Healthy poop is made of, and this is an interesting fact that most people don't know. Most people assume that what's coming out of your body is just waste. And that's 1/3 of the equation. 1/3 of what's coming out is actually bacteria. Now I'm going to tell you a little secret about bacteria and how you can identify bacteria. Even though we can't see it, there's a very, very easy way to identify bacteria. Basically, bacteria in our world has the function of producing smell. So if you walk up to a rose and you smell it and it smells beautiful, it's bacteria that is responsible for producing that smell. That means there is bacteria on that rose that you're smelling. How do you know? Because otherwise it wouldn't smell like anything. The same with bad smell. If you are walking on the street and there's a dead animal and it smells disgusting, then you know even though I can't see them, there is a lot of bacteria on this dead animal. How do I know? Because there is a very, very strong smell. And bacteria is basically involved with the production of smell. Which is interesting if we apply it to our bodies as well. Because if we think, what are the parts of our body that smell the most? Both good and bad. So we would say under the armpits. Well, actually, there's a lot of bacteria under the armpits. Bacteria like humidity. They like protection and dark and a safe place. So the armpits are actually quite a perfect spot for bacteria. So let's say that I'm walking along and I brush this chair, and there's bacteria on the chair, which there's bacteria everywhere, there's bacteria in the air. And now that bacteria on the chair is on my hand, and I sit down because I'm bored and I sit like this, and so now this bacteria that was on the chair, that was on my hand, is now in my armpit. And then the bacteria that otherwise maybe would have gotten brushed off my finger thrives under my armpit because it likes it there. It's a little bit humid, it's a little bit warm, it's dark, it's secluded, it's safe. And so that bacteria will grow and proliferate. So that all of a sudden these thousands of bacteria that came on my finger ended up in my armpit are all of a sudden millions of bacteria. And they're busy eating and doing the stuff they do and producing smell. And so that's why we get smell under the armpits, for example. So like when we poop has a tremendously strong smell. Why? Because 1/3 of that is bacteria. And so of course they're producing a huge amount of smell. And we have our bodies have developed to identify both good smell and bad smell because it tells us if what the bacteria is producing and the bacteria themselves, if they're beneficial to us, then they smell good. If they're not beneficial to us, then they smell bad. So it's just a way for our body to know, should I eat this? Should I touch this? Should I be around this or not? If I walk into a house that's full of mold and my body kind of feels, whoosh, this isn't good. Well, that's because my body is recognizing that there's a ton of bacteria in this house that is going to do me harm. If it gets into my digestive tract, into my stomach, into my large intestine, it's going to cause havoc. It's going to make me sick. And so I should leave this house. Whereas if I'm walking and I smell this delicious scent and I'm thinking, what is that? And it's mango season and there's these luscious, delicious, beautiful mangoes that not only look perfectly ripe but are sending out this scent. That is my body recognizing, there's a bunch of bacteria in this orange thing that if I eat it are very beneficial to me. So bacteria, they produce smell and they tell us, is this good for me or is it not? So that's your best way to know, should I eat this or not, is smell it. If your body says, good, eat this, eat it. If your body says, then don't eat it. So what else is in our poop? 1/3 of it is undigestible fiber. And so it's this stuff that the bacteria ate and ate and ate and ate and ate, but they never get it all. There's too much fiber coming through, hopefully, that the bacteria, they're full, they're all they needed, and still there's more fiber, and so that helps produce the mass. And then 1/3 of it is waste that the body wants to get rid of. That's toxins, that's chemicals that our body has produced, that we need to get rid of. It's, all of the side effects of just living as our body is constantly cleaning the blood going through our liver and our lungs, cleaning out the air that we're breathing. All of that stuff eventually makes its way into the large intestine and then comes out. So 1/3 of it is bacteria. That's why it smells so much. 1/3 of it is undigestible fiber, and 1/3 of it is the waste that our body wants to get rid of. So what does our poop tell us about the health of our digestive tract? And this is very important because, health has many aspects. You can have a broken ankle and otherwise be perfectly healthy. And so I can, think and write emails and laugh, but you ask me to walk a block, I can't do it because my ankle is broken. So parts of us can be healthy and not necessarily affect other parts of us. So we can be regularly healthy and have a terribly unhealthy digestive tract. Or we can be relatively unhealthy and have good digestion. So it's just another component of health. And it's important now that we're studying the gut to be able to understand, is our gut healthy? And if so, how do we know that? So for example, there's people who are constantly constipated. Going to the bathroom is very, very difficult for them. It's actually a huge problem for a big number of people in our population, that they just can't go to the bathroom. Some people go every 9 or 10 days. That is not normal. And when they do go to the bathroom, the poop is tremendously dry because it's taken not 3 days to go out of the large intestine, but 9 or 10 days. And so the body just keeps sucking up the water and sucking up the water. And eventually what comes out is like rocks. And that's not comfortable. So how do we know if our digestive tract is healthy or not? So in Bristol, in England, there was a team that decided, let's study poop. And so they spent many years studying poop and figuring out, and they created this stool scale. It's called the Bristol stool scale, and this basically is a scale from 1 to 7. and they divide poop into 7 categories. One is rock hard poop. It's usually small pebbles of rock hard poop. Very, very dry, very, very hard. Then 2 is like little larger rocks, but still kind of very dry on the outside. And then 3 is sausage shaped, but it's like cracked. So it's like the desert land where it's one big mass, but there's cracks in it. So you do have a sausage shape, but it's cracked. 4 is you have a sausage shape, very smooth. That's what we want. That is the ideal poop. So we want a sausage, we want it to be solid, but have no cracks. And then 5 is you no longer have a complete sausage. It's kind of shaped, but it's very liquidy. And then 6 is you have more just globs of liquid and mass. And then 7 is mostly just liquid. So this is the Bristol stool scale from rock hard solid poop to basically just liquid poop. And you don't have to have 4 always to be healthy, but that's the healthiest type of poop. It means that your digestive tract is doing everything right, you're feeding it the right balance of things. So the other thing too is normally we should have 1 bowel movement a day. We go to the bathroom and pee many times, many times. But we should go to the bathroom and poop usually once a day. If you're going once every 2 days or once every 3 days, it's no need to be alarmed. Lots of people, it varies quite a bit. Some people go twice a day, and that's not a big deal either. But regularly, they tend to say you should go once a day. That's what's normal. Also, it should be quick and easy. So these people that I talked about that are constipated, they sit on the toilet for 20 minutes and nothing comes out. So when you go to the bathroom, it should be, you feel these 2 valves, they're letting you know, okay, it's time to let something out. You go to the toilet, you sit down and you poop. And then you clean yourself, get dressed again, go out, and it's done. So it should be relatively quick and easy. Again, if it takes you 5-7 minutes, if you like looking at magazines while you're sitting at the toilet, there's nothing wrong with that. But it shouldn't be problematic. It shouldn't take a long time. And then it should follow a predictable pattern. If your digestive tract is really ultimately healthy, you should poop pretty much at the same time every day, like clockwork. And usually it's in the morning. So at night, your system has been resting and it's been kind of doing its thing. And so then when you get up in the morning, the large intestine has shifted everything into day 3 position. Get up in the morning, you start moving around, you're doing your thing, you get dressed, you have breakfast. And this movement is actually important in our digestive process. And then eventually, your body makes you feel, oh, okay, now it's time to go to the bathroom. So maybe a couple hours after you've been up, if you get up at 6, maybe at 8. If you get up at 8, maybe 10 or 11, then you should be going to the bathroom. And it should be pretty regular. Again, if you don't have that kind of regularity, it's not the end of the world. A lot of people have a lot of variations on this, but these are 3 pointers that should let you know, wow, my digestive tract is healthy, or maybe it's not as healthy as it should be. Am I eating the wrong kinds of things? Is there actually a problem with my digestive tract? Do I maybe have the wrong type of bacteria? So something could be wrong. So these are just 3 pointers to help us understand, is our digestive tract healthy or not? So now that we've talked about the digestive tract and understand all of that, let's focus on this bacteria that we've talked about and that is so important. So what is the life cycle of this gut-bacteria relationship? Because we are living together with many organisms. We're an ecosystem. So let's understand the ecosystem. To begin with, the human body as an adult has about 37 trillion cells in our body. So if I take a little tiny finger cell, that tiny finger cell has all of the DNA necessary to reproduce my entire body. It's incredible. And if I take a little eye cell, that eye cell has all of the DNA, all of the information necessary to reproduce all of my body, even that finger. The information to reproduce the cell in my finger is in my eye. Same thing with my hair and my nose and my feet, and it's incredible. So these 37 trillion cells, even though their functions are very different, they all have that same copy of the DNA, which is the information necessary to reproduce my entire body. It's incredible. So we think we have a lot of cells, and we do. Well, we have about 370 trillion bacterium in our gut. That is 10 times more bacteria than cells in our entire body. And we talked about how one of these bacteria can control rats and force them to commit suicide, or at least endanger themselves to get eaten by a cat. So what do you think 370 trillion bacteria can do inside of us? It's really, really incredible. And we understand this so little. But the research that is being done is already giving us a lot of information. So let's understand the cycle, how we populate our gut, and then we'll talk about what kinds of things these bacteria are doing to us and for us. So the gut begins as an empty landscape. These 8 yards, this tennis court of landscape, is high, desirable real estate for bacteria. But when you're inside of your mommy, and you aren't born yet, you're completely sterile. Your gut is completely empty of bacteria. So is your skin and your eyes. In the womb, the baby does not have any contact with bacteria. It's completely sterile. There are few places in nature that are perfectly sterile. The womb is one. Coconut water, for example, is also sterile. So coconut water, it's gone through this magical process of being sucked up from the ground through this entire coconut tree and ends up in a coconut, and that coconut water is bacteria-free. The moment you break it open, it starts getting populated with bacteria, because there's bacteria in the air, in the knife you use to open it, and everything. But before you open it, coconut water is bacteria-free. Same thing with the baby. So what happens when the baby is born? If the baby comes out through the vagina of the mother, the baby basically gets covered from head to toes with the mother's bacteria. And the mother's bacteria is the healthiest thing that the baby could get. Because basically the baby and the mother till that point are one and the same. So the mother's been kind of preparing her bacteria to give this baby the best of her bacteria. And so these bacteria, they're first on the outside of the baby, but very, very quickly they crawl into the mouth and into the rest of the body, and they start populating this gut. And they're like, oh my God, look at all this beach. I'm gonna put my house here. And let's have babies because there's more free area. Let's populate this entire gut. But what happens if you're born through a C-section, and the first contact that that baby has with the outside world is the nurse's hands? Then your gut is going to first be populated with the bacteria on the nurse's hands, which could be okay if it's a healthy nurse, that's great. But it's not as ideal as the bacteria that your mother would have given you. So just to begin with, how the child is born can influence very much what kind of bacteria start to populate your body. So then after that, everything you put into your mouth influences how you shape your bacteria. So if you're a little baby and you're like going around and you're chewing on the TV, I am getting TV bacteria into my gut. which could be good and could be bad. I'm out playing in the park with my friends and I'm eating dirt, and so I'm getting dirt bacteria into my gut, which could be good and could be bad. And my uncle comes over and he picks me up and he's laughing with me and cuddling me and talking to me, and he sneezes, and so I'm getting a bunch of my uncle's nose bacteria into my gut. So slowly but surely, all of the gut is populated by bacteria. Basically what we put into our mouth, whatever we come into contact with. And there's good bacteria and bad bacteria. So we want to populate our gut with mostly good bacteria. And we don't always have control over that. But if we are in a relatively safe environment, not surrounded by sick people, and then it's usually good. Every day what we choose to eat shapes what bacteria thrive in our gut. So once the gut is fully populated, I can influence that. Let's say that there's a bacteria that's not so good for me, and that bacteria loves tomatoes. And I decide I'm not going to eat tomatoes. I'm not going to eat it for a whole month. Then this bacteria in my gut probably eventually goes, this isn't such a good place to live with. I'm going to take the next poop out. And so he hops onto this next poop and he goes out of my body, and he's no longer there because I didn't eat tomatoes that helped him thrive. So he didn't want to be there. So every day what I'm eating influences how my bacteria is developing and shaping. There's bacteria that love white bread. There's bacteria that love broccoli. There's bacteria that love zucchini and bacteria that love Diet Coke. And so what I choose to put in is helping decide what my gut has as far as this population. Every day, what enters our digestive tract alters what bacteria is in our gut. So, what do bacteria do for us? The ones in our gut, what do they do for us? They can make us sick, for sure. But they can also provide us with vitamins. There are bacteria that are especially effective at absorbing, processing, digesting, and absorbing refined carbohydrates. So let's take an example, and let's say that I pick up a package of Nabisco cookies. And on the package it says, 1 serving is 2 cookies. Okay, so I pull out 2 cookies. And 2 cookies are 300 calories. So now I know that I'm going to be eating 300 calories. And so I think I should be eating 2,000 calories in a day. Okay, this is about 1/6 of my intake. So these 2 cookies are 1/6 of what I should be eating that day. And then I have another friend who is doing the same experiment as me. He picks up the Nabisco package, pulls out 2 cookies. We're both going to be eating 300 calories. So start munching, we're enjoying our cookies. Yum. And then a day later, he has absorbed 300 calories. And I have absorbed 240 calories from those cookies. Is that possible? Well, that's actually the way it is. So because if I have a lot of bacteria that are really, really good at processing, digesting, and absorbing cookies, then I'm going to get the full potential of those calories. But if I have a digestive system that is very, very good at digesting broccoli and spinach and kale, and well, these cookies come by, and I do have some gut bacteria that are good at getting the calories out of these cookies, and my small intestine for sure is going to take some of those carbohydrates from these cookies in the process, but maybe not the entire cookie is going to be absorbed, and some of it is going to go out unprocessed. So there are nutrients, there are vitamins, there are things that we eat that our body does not fully take advantage of. That happens all the time, it's perfectly normal. So what we eat on a regular basis shapes our bacteria and our gut, and it helps define what our digestive system is good at or not good at digesting. And that's why some people, you know, if you are a vegetarian and you haven't eaten meat for a long time, you just don't have the bacteria to break down meat like it should be. And so even though your system is still going to digest it, you're going to get some of the protein from the meat, it's not going to be as easy because you don't have that huge help from these 370 trillion bacteria that are good at digesting meat. There are bacteria that produce all kinds of chemicals, and our body is basically chemicals. So, you know, all of our hormones, they cause all kinds of reactions. Well, there are bacteria that produce chemicals that are identical to some of the hormones that we produce in our bodies. So there's a hormone that makes us happy. There are bacteria that produce that same hormone that make us happy. There are bacteria that produce the same hormones that make us depressed. So that's how these bacteria, even though they're tiny organisms hidden away in our gut that we do not see, these bacteria are affecting our bodies every single day by what they produce, by what they're being fed or not fed, and how what they're putting into our body is affecting our body. So, what should our gut look like to give us our best health? Basically, we should have a diverse variety of good bacteria, and that is going to keep us healthy. And what does a good variety of healthy bacteria mean? That means that we should eat varied kinds of foods. If we're eating McDonald's and Wendy's and Burger King 6 times a week, we're not giving our gut a variety of things. Our gut is basically getting processed flour, concentrated tomato and ketchup, high fructose corn syrup, processed meat, just maybe 30, 40 products, and that's it. And so our bacteria are not thriving. Only the ones that do digest these certain things. So what we should be eating is a huge variety of different things. If today you had salad, tomorrow have a soup, and the next day have a sandwich, and the next day have spaghetti, and the next day have meat, and just as wide a variety of foods as you can, as often as possible. So if you think, oh, I haven't had sunflower seeds in a long time, eat sunflower seeds. It's going to be good for you. So that's how we can have as good a bacteria population in us as possible, by eating a huge variety of healthy foods. So how can we help shape our microbiota? We need to focus on eating things that are very, very high in fiber. And that's basically fruits and vegetables, grains, seeds, everything that comes from nature in its natural form. Anything that's processed, flours, sugars, cornmeal, anything that comes in a box is processed. Basically means they've taken the fiber out of it, which lets it sit on the shelf for a year and not go bad, but it doesn't have that fiber, which is so important for our digestive system and for our bacteria, and in turn for us and our health. Both the membership of the gut community and what they are doing are affected by what we choose to eat every single day. So if I choose a very unhealthy diet, I'm going to be day by day shaping a very unhealthy microbiota. If I choose to eat healthy every single day, then I am shaping a very healthy microbiota. This is very, very interesting. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we're starting to discover about the microbiota and its importance. Lean people harbor greater bacterial diversity in their gut than obese people. Some people say it's so unfair my friend Michelle can eat anything and doesn't gain any weight? Well, part of the answer to that mystery is that Michelle probably has a very good, diverse microbiota. And so if she eats cake, this healthy microbiota doesn't consume all of the cake, doesn't take up all of those calories, because some of it like it, but some don't. They're waiting for corn and broccoli and onions and spinach and all of those other good things. So she has a healthy microbiota that helps consume a healthy diet. And how does she do this? By every day investing in her microbiota, by eating healthy on a regular basis. So lean people, if you cut somebody open and you check the gut of somebody who is overweight in relationship to somebody who is not overweight, what you're going to find is that the person who is lean has a bigger diversity of bacteria in their gut. Isn't that interesting? And so, of course, what we eat and how we shape this bacteria in our guts has a huge effect on us, more than we understand today. We're just beginning to scratch the tip of the iceberg. It's amazing. So that was today's lecture. Thank you very much.